Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have some of my favourite meals from the past week, recipes I've been testing and have made it again recently. The first recipe is this creamy shiitake mushroom risotto. For this I made the mushroom stock by finely chopping 3 shallots. I heated some oil in a saucepan and added in 1 of the chopped shallots. I then minced 3 cloves of garlic and added in 1 of those minced cloves to the pan and fried the shallot and garlic off until soft. Next I took 150 grams of shiitake mushrooms, added those to the pan and fried those off for around 5 to 10 minutes until they were lightly golden in colour. I crumbled in a stock cube next. I used these callow mushroom stock cubes which are amazing for this, but a vegetable stock cube will also work. Then I added in a pinch of salt and black pepper, stirred it to combine and brought it to a gentle boil. I then reduced it back down to a gentle simmer for 10 minutes, then turned off the heat and let it cool slightly before adding in a heaped teaspoon of miso paste and stirred that through, then just allowed the stock to cool down even further. Over in a separate shallow pan, I drizzled around a tablespoon of oil, then added in the other 2 chopped shallots and 2 minced cloves of garlic, and I fried those off until soft on a medium heat. I then added in the risotto rice, stirred that through to combine everything and just continued to lightly toast it off until the rice turned slightly translucent. Once it had cooled down slightly, I transferred the stock over to my Vitamix blender. You could just blend it in the pan using a handheld blender, and I blended that until it was completely smooth. I then poured it back into the pan and gently reheated it, but not to the point where it's boiling. Boiling the miso kills the probiotics since it's a fermented food, so just enough to warm it through. I didn't use any white wine this time. I think it tastes great without it, but it also tastes good if you did want to add vegan white wine. And you would pour it in at this point and continue to just stir until it is cooked into the rice. Once the rice was slightly translucent, I added the first ladle of stock into it, along with a good pinch of sea salt. I turned the heat down low and continued stirring until the stock had pretty much completely cooked off. I then continued adding in the stock 1 ladle at a time, allowing each ladleful to be fully absorbed by the rice before adding in the next. It takes around 15 minutes until the rice is cooked and you've used up all of the stock, and it should be soft but with a little bit of a bite to it. Once I'd added in the final ladle of stock to the pan, I then took 100 grams of shiitake mushrooms and added those to the empty stock pan with a little olive oil. And I just fried those off for around 5 minutes until they were golden in colour. While those were cooking, I turned off the heat on the risotto, and then I added 1 tablespoon of vegan butter. I then grated in around 1/4 cup of vegan Parmesan cheese, but that is optional. A tablespoon of nutritional yeast. I used a really cheesy nutritional yeast which is unreal. I'll link to it down below. I squeezed in some lemon juice, added in some fresh chopped parsley and seasoned to taste with some more salt and pepper. I stirred all of that through well, and then placed on the lid and allowed it to sit for 3 minutes. At this point the mushrooms were lovely and golden. I served up the risotto rice and then I added the fried shiitake mushrooms on the top. Alternatively, you can stir them through the rice before serving. I grated some more vegan Parmesan over the top and sprinkled on some more fresh parsley. And that is that. I actually don't often make risotto, but when I do have it, I really enjoy it. Mushroom risotto is probably my favourite, and the shiitake mushrooms really make this so flavourful. They have a nice flavour to them anyway, and they're not as watery compared to some other mushrooms, so they hold a lot of the flavour. If you really can't find shiitake mushrooms, porcini mushrooms or oyster mushrooms would also work really well for this. The risotto itself is so creamy. It's a long process adding the stock a ladleful at a time, but it brings out the starch from the rice, which makes the risotto so creamy. That plus the nutritional yeast and vegan parmesan with the umami flavours from the rich mushroom stock as well make this such a tasty dish. Another favourite from this week were the spicy Thai inspired jackfruit fish cakes with a noodle salad. To make the jackfruit fish cakes, I first added 2 chopped spring onions to a food processor, followed by a handful of fresh mint leaves and a handful of fresh coriander, 3 chopped bird's eye chillies, a 6cm chunk of fresh ginger roughly chopped, half a nori sheet roughly cut up, then a tablespoon of lemongrass puree. I can't find fresh lemongrass anywhere at the moment, but usually I would use 2 lemongrass stalks. Then 1 tablespoon of garlic puree, 1 tablespoon of tomato puree, 2 teaspoons of tamari, then the zest of half an unwaxed lime and the juice of half a lime. I then sprinkled in a good pinch of sea salt and cracked in some black pepper. I blended that up until it formed a kind of paste which looked like this, and then to the main bowl of the food processor I added in a can of drained chickpeas and 1/4 cup of rice flour. And again, I blended that together for around a minute until that was well combined together and it looked like this. I then took a can of jackfruit and just drained off as much of the water as I could. I then emptied the contents into a clean tea towel and removed the seeds. I just wrapped it all up, took it over to the sink and squeezed all of the excess water through the tea towel. It needs to be done a few times to make sure it's as drained off as possible. I then added the drained jackfruit into the food processor bowl along with the Thai inspired paste, and I then only pulsed that together a couple of times just to help combine it, and I ran a spatula around the bowl too just to help everything mix together. I then took a heaped tablespoon of the mixture at a time and formed it into little patties using my hands. Wetting your hands with a little water between forming each one makes things a little bit easier. And I just repeated that until I used up all of the mixture. It should create 12 of these jackfruit fish cakes in total. I placed those on a large plate and popped them in the fridge to chill. Meanwhile, I made a noodle salad to go with them, and for this I took half a red bell pepper and just really finely sliced that up into thin strips. I then took around 1/3 of a cucumber and again just sliced it up into thin strips. I then placed 2 nests of vermicelli noodles in a bowl, covered them with boiling water and allowed them to sit for 3 minutes. I drained those off and gave them a good rinse through. I then added in the red pepper and cucumber, along with a handful of fresh mint, a handful of fresh coriander, around a teaspoon of sesame oil, a teaspoon of tamari and the juice of half a lime, and then I just tossed it all together really well, and I then put that in the fridge to keep chilled while I cook the jackfruit fish cakes. I heated a little oil in a frying pan and I just fried the jackfruit fish cakes off on each side for around 5 minutes. While they were cooking on the underside, I also brushed them with a little tomato puree mixed with oil for even more flavour, but more so to give them a nice colour. I fried them in batches of 3 at a time, and once they were done, I just placed them on an old but clean tea towel to absorb any excess oil. Once they were all fried off, I served up some of the noodle salad with the spicy Thai inspired jackfruit fish cakes on the side. I sprinkled some sesame seeds over the top and added some more red chilli and spring onion. These are amazing with some sweet chili sauce as a dip. On their own though, they have so much flavour from the chili, ginger, the lemongrass, garlic, the mint, the coriander, a true flavour explosion. The nori gives them that kind of taste of the sea, a real fish cake flavour. The chickpeas hold them together and the jackfruit gives them the texture. I originally made these fish cakes using just jackfruit. They were great. Fish cakes are also usually made using mashed potato, but I really wanted to add some protein into these, and the mashed chickpeas work so well. The cold noodle salad is super refreshing with them, and all of the flavours combined are really delicious. And then another recent favourite recipe has been this crispy mango and coconut tofu with coconut rice and garlicky greens. For the crispy mango and coconut tofu coating, I added 1 mango to my blender. If you cut your mango in half and then slice a glass through it, it literally just scoops it right out of the skin. To that I added a handful of fresh coriander. I then took 1/4 cup of coconut milk powder and added that into the blender with 1/4 cup of desiccated coconut. Then 1 chopped bird's eye chilli, a tablespoon of garlic puree, the zest of half a lime and then the juice of half a lime, a teaspoon of onion granules, a teaspoon of paprika, then a good pinch of sea salt, and I blended that up on a high speed until it was as smooth as possible, using a spatula halfway through just to make sure everything was mixing well. I then just poured that into a bowl and let it chill in the fridge. And I next took a block of drained extra firm tofu. If your tofu isn't extra firm, make sure you press it first. And I just tore chunks of that off into a larger bowl. I then sprinkled in 1/4 cup of corn flour over the tofu with a pinch of salt, and I tossed it through to coat all of the pieces really well. I then tipped those out on a baking tray. I brushed them with a little oil, and I had preheated my oven to 180 degrees Celsius. So I placed those in the oven to bake for around 10 minutes until they were slightly golden in colour, turning them over halfway through. I then removed them from the oven and took half of that mango coconut marinade and just brushed that on each piece of tofu. I did the top first and then I turned them all over and coated the undersides as well and made sure that they were well coated on all sides. I then placed those back in the oven for another 10 minutes, and meanwhile I made the coconut rice. In a shallow pan on the hob, I melted a tablespoon of vegan butter on a medium heat. I then added in half a mug of basmati rice and a good pinch of sea salt, and I just fried that off in the butter for a couple of minutes. I then added in a can of full fat coconut milk. I used the rich and creamy coconut milk from Aldi. It's so good. It's not watery, it's so thick and creamy, the best one I've come across. Look at that coconut cream. I just gave it a quick stir through, but the cream melts instantly, and then I left that on a medium heat and covered it, allowing it to cook for 10 minutes. I then removed the mango coconut tofu from the oven and coated them again with the other half of the marinade, just roughly over all of them. And then I placed that back in the oven to finish off for a final 10 minutes. For the greens, I filled a separate pan with boiling water, placed a sieve in the pan, and then 100 grams each of tender stem broccoli and green beans in the sieve. covered with the lid and just left those to steam for a couple of minutes. Once done, I drained them, added them to the empty pan, and at this point I turned off the heat on the rice and I just moved it to the back of the hob. Back to the greens, I drizzled in some sesame oil, added in a tablespoon of garlic puree, some sliced red chilli, some sesame seeds and a pinch of salt, and I just tossed all of that together. I removed the tofu from the oven. At this point it's crispy and all of those amazing flavours are baked on. I then gave the rice a final stir. It had gone a little bit crispy on the bottom. It's amazing. I served up the rice with some of the garlicky greens on the side, and then I took the tofu and added that on the top. I just mixed what was left of the marinade in the bowl with some lime juice, so I drizzled that over the top as like a dressing, and I added some crushed coconut flakes, some spring onion, red chilli and some fresh coriander on the top, and with some more lime on the side because you can never have too much. This is my kind of food, that crispy tofu coated in the flavours of the sweet mango and the coconut with fresh lime juice and the coriander on top. It's unbelievable. Baking the tofu in the corn flour makes it almost puffy and gives it like a crispy coating. Then with the creamy coconut rice and the garlic green beans and broccoli, it's all so good. That's it. I hope you enjoyed these recipes. As always, they will be written or linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video. Bye!